Welcome to the Teaching Autism and Special Education Community Podcast. Hi, I'm Nikki, a passionate special educator, autism advocate, resource creator with over a decade of experience, and you may know me as the face behind Teaching Autism. This podcast is your go-to place for practical tips, hands-on strategies, and inspiring and funny stories to support special educators all around the world, whether it's building independence, creating engaging lessons, or finding that elusive work-life balance. I'm here to help you thrive inside and outside of the classroom. Let's dive into today's episode and make a difference together. Hey teacher friends, and welcome back to another episode of the Teaching Autism and Special Education podcast. All right, it's that time of year again. The pumpkins are out. There is glitter everywhere. Someone has eaten 3 fun-sized chocolates before 9 a.m. and your students are suddenly all dressed as Spider-Man. Halloween season is so much fun, but it can also send our sensory systems straight into overload city. And that is exactly what we are going to be chatting about today. So how to tell the difference between a sensory overload and what might look like a tantrum. Because they can look really similar on the outside, but they do come from completely different places. All right, so let's paint the scene. It's Halloween week in your classroom. You've got orange lights flickering, spooky soft music playing, and maybe a cauldron full of slime bubbling away in the corner. Everything looks Pinterest perfect until one of your students suddenly throws themselves on the floor, covers their ears, and starts screaming. Now, your first thought might be, oh no, meltdown. Or even, is this a tantrum? But what's actually happening might be sensory overload. So what is sensory overload? Sensory overload happens when the brain gets too much input from the environment. And for our neurodivergent students, their brains can't filter all of that sensory information like most people's can. So it's like every sound and smell and texture and light hits them all at once. So instead of being able to say, this music's a bit too loud, that pumpkin candle smells funny, this costume feels too itchy, their brains are exploding and literally screaming that this is too much. And then what happens is the body goes into fight, flight, or freeze mode. So what you might see is a student covering their ears or their eyes. You might see a student running away. You might have a student who's crying and screaming. You might have a student who is refusing to join in, or maybe even physically lashing out. And at this point, it's not about getting attention. It's almost survival for them because their system is so overloaded that they are doing whatever they can to escape the chaos. So then this is where I usually get asked, well, what's a tantrum then? So a tantrum, on the other hand, usually has an intentional goal. So a child might be upset because they wanted more sweets, or maybe they wanted to wear a different costume. Maybe they wanted to go first in the pumpkin toss. So tantrums come from frustration or from wanting something that they can't have. And once that need is met or redirected, it usually ends pretty quickly. But sensory overload, that meltdown keeps going until the nervous system feels safe again. So no sticker chart or first and then board in the world is going to fix it in that moment. And this is why Halloween kind of makes it tricky, because basically Halloween combines every sensory trigger possible into one big sparkly chaos pumpkin ball. So think flashing lights and crowded hallways and masks and itchy costumes and sudden noises and jumpy scares and strong smells. And not just from things like candles, like even makeup and candy, all those things have different smells as well. So you may find that even your students who usually regulate well can actually tip into overload this time of year. And at home, it's the same. So, you think of Halloween night, the doorbell's constantly ringing and siblings are very excited. There's sugar highs. Bedtime is later. So if you notice a student or even your own child melting down a little bit, just try and pause before labeling it as behavior and ask yourself, is it possible that they're just overwhelmed? So I'm going to share now a few little clues for how you can tell the difference between a tantrum and sensory overload. So a tantrum has a goal or demand. So I want candy, whereas sensory overload doesn't really have a clear reason or trigger. During a tantrum, your child is going to check for your reaction, whereas in sensory overload, that child may seem disconnected or not even responding. In a tantrum, it's going to stop quickly once they get what they want. But in sensory overload, it's going to continue until they feel calm or safe again. A tantrum is very emotion driven, whereas sensory overload is physiological. It's a body response. And one thing to remember is that sometimes it's actually a mix. So a child might actually start with a tantrum, but they can then slip into overload once emotions and that sensory input skyrocket. All right, so I hear you. You're asking, Nikki, how on earth can we help during spooky season then? So here are some easy wins. Number one, tone down the classroom sensory chaos. You don't have to cancel Halloween. I love Halloween and I do it in a way that my students love it in the classroom as well. So the main thing is to just be mindful. So maybe skip those bright flashing lights and go for some soft twinkling lighting instead. Number two, offer sensory breaks. So you could create a quiet pumpkin calming corner or use some movement breaks. Even just a few minutes of calm can prevent a full-blown meltdown boiling up and coming out later. Number three, prep your students for change. So I like to use visuals, mini stories, social stories about what to expect. So things like costumes and parties and noise, because the more that they know, the safer they're going to feel. Number four, give choices. Some students might love the costume parade. Others might want to sit and watch or wave from the side. Both are okay options. Number five, watch for early signs. So if you see a student starting to cover their ears, rock back and forth, fidget more than usual, this might be your cue to step in early before it becomes a full overload. All right, let's talk empathy. The biggest and best thing that we can do in these situations is to lead with empathy. So instead of, oh, he's just being dramatic, try saying, he's showing me that his world feels a little bit too big and chaotic right now. Because when we meet that sensory overload, what we want to meet it with is sort of us showing them that we understand what's going on. And even if we don't understand, we can show them that we care and we want to understand and we want to connect with them and we want to find out how we can help them. And this will help our students realize that they're safe with us, they can trust us, we're a safe person, and that their feelings are valid with us. And that is way more important than any crazy perfect Halloween craft that you were thinking of doing. So before your Halloween party or fall festival, I want you to take a moment to look around your room and ask, is there anything that might feel overwhelming here? Is there an area here that my students can go to for complete and pure calm? Can I offer my students any other control over their environment? So even just a few small changes and tweaks, they can mean the difference between a meltdown and a magical day of Halloween fun. All right, so wrapping up for today, remember Halloween is exciting, but it's also loud and unpredictable and full of sensory surprises. So it's really important for us to try and understand the difference between sensory overload and tantrums and how we can respond, especially with compassion and empathy and understanding instead of just correction and punishment. And that is where the real Halloween fun and magic comes in. So you've got this. If all else fails, my best Halloween advice is to hide a stash of chocolate for yourself in the cupboard to munch into when your students go home that day. All right, friends, thanks for tuning in today. If you found this episode helpful, please share it with a fellow special ed teacher who's also about to brave Halloween week. Let's help each other survive it with humour, grace, and maybe some chocolate bars. Talk to you soon.